All right, let's take a quick pause. This is yet another, you heard it here first, folks. Right here on Let Me Speak to a Manager. Ian and I were early on the recession. We were early on the pullback of real estate. All of these things are coming to fruition.
We were early on inflation. We've been early on friggin' everything, FYI.
And adapting hats during the work week. We're early on that as well. And
very big.
Yes,
very
it's big. We
So
may be unwoke, but damn it, we're early.
we are unwoke, and we're early on that too. It might be cool to be woke, but we're early on being unwoke. That trend is picking up right now. Frankie, this was an incredible episode. I cannot wait for people to listen to it. We just got done recording our episode about why companies innovate, and we used the example of the PGA Tour and the Live Golf Tour and compared it to a number of analogs, examples in the past with the beer wars, the Pepsi Coke wars. We talked about Apple, Samsung. Really fun article, Frankie, episode. Frankie, what are people going to take away from this?
What I think we're going to show you is this is not new. We're going to use some sporting examples as well that are very similar to what's happening with the PGA and with Live. And what happens in every instance that Ian and I draw on in this episode is you're an upstart at first. You forget what got you there. You get fat, you get lazy. And if you don't innovate, you go away. And what I think you can use as an employee or as an employer, you look at your business or your resume and you say, how do I innovate? How do I get better? And that's the takeaway with this. We're going to use some fun examples of showing you if you keep yourself accountable, or if you see this new young kid that just graduated college who you're afraid is going to take your job, how do you innovate? How do you get further? How do you stay ahead and drive? And that's what we think we've accomplished on this episode, and we hope you enjoy it.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Matthews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
You can't say God.
Don't worry, nobody's listening anyway.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie.
Ian, you tardy son of a bitch.
Frankie, when's the last time you've been golfing?
Is Top Golf included?
Top Golf counts. I think that counts.
And we did do putt-putt in my driveway this past weekend. It was a lot of fun. Two kids.
You are golfing way more than I thought.
Yeah, my one of my sons didn't even wear pants. It was perfect.
So another question I've got for you. How many football games per season do you think you watch?
Oh, college and pro, a ton. I mean, especially because of we'll have the Red Zone channel, and because of our incredibly high stakes fantasy football league of four teams. I watch a ton of football. So like on a normal weekend, I mean, TV's probably on 8 hours a week for football. And with little kids, it's hard to sit and watch. You just kind of pop in and out, but it's constantly on.
But fair to say that on a typical Saturday or Sunday in the fall, you're seeing some football. Like it would take an extraordinarily busy schedule for you to miss some bit of football on a Saturday. There's usually some game that you're like, I got to see some of that.
Thursday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, there's football on, I would say 95% of those days, at least for a couple of minutes, unless it's just one of these dog do games that the NFL has on ESPN on a Monday. But more often than not, I'm turning those on.
Okay. So now my next question is, when is the last golf tournament you can remember where you thought, I have to see all 4 days of that, I'm tuning in, it's going to be on the entire time?
So I'm a Tiger Woods fan. He's basically the same age as me. I grew up watching him. So the latest resurrection, like I remember we were in Florida, Ellie and me, my wife, and we went to a bar in Lauderdale. I'm like, Tiger tees off. And he went like on Thursday, he was like super low. We're like, holy crap, he's got a chance. So Friday we go back and he's like, he did okay. And then Saturday he was like 12 over. I don't remember the exact number, but it was so like very quickly it tuned off. But like ever since Tiger has not been relevant, like I tried to watch the British Open and I struggled. And even with Rory up top, who I think is great, it's just doesn't compel me to watch.
So fair to say if Tiger Woods is not in contention or golfing in the tournament, you're really not paying attention.
If it's not a major, And if he's not in, there's almost no desire for me to see it. Almost none.
I'm about the same. If Tiger Woods is in it, I'll pay attention because I know him. Or if a bigger name is really going to be in it, or two are going to be going into. I almost never watch Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Normally, I'm kind of like, let me know who's in contention on Sunday, and I might watch a little.
Who are the bigger names though? Like, who do you want is a bigger name in golf right now?
I mean, Brooks Koepka. If Brooks Koepka and Rory were going head to head on a Sunday,
okay, keep going. Who else?
Scotty Scheffler's a big name, but he doesn't draw me at all. I don't get excited.
Okay, who else? That's the problem. Most of the names are led with There's nobody compelling. There's not a lot of stars. Like, the stars are people who are over the hill. Like, people that I talk to about golf, do you know who they're excited about? Like, the person they're most excited about right now in golf?
Who?
Tiger Woods' son, who's 12. Like, when he goes pro, like 10 more years. Like, it's like, yeah, I might have had eyesight by then.
That's literally the only two golfers that IJ knows. My 11-year-old son knows Tiger Woods and Tiger Woods' son. And that's only because a bunch of videos of the two of them are just going viral all the time about how similar they look. But
right.
I think that's a good enough intro to say both you and I love sports and will drop anything to watch a sport that's compelling, a compelling series, a compelling game. I don't watch NBA during the regular season, but if there's a good series on the playoffs, I'm watching the games. If there's a good enough product, I'm going to watch a baseball playoff series. If it's a good one, if the Dodgers and Yankees play, I guarantee, Frankie, you'll be turning those games on in October because they're laden with stars. They're tradition based, and it's a good playoff. Baseball is a better product than regular season.
I have a better question for you. Is there anything you would like, by and large, regular season to regular season? Is there anything else you'd watch over football, regular season to regular season? Almost
it would
no,
get
right?
me to turn a game off. Probably nothing on football unless it was like a big heavyweight fight.
Okay.
And it was two names I knew, which is very
And
rare.
those are usually at 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday, so they don't really compete with the NFL. But the point is this, like, when golf was at its absolute peak, when Tiger was at his peak in the early 2000s, I would turn off Sunday football to watch Sunday golf. And I will no longer even contemplate that. Like, it's not even like, I'm moving into a new office and I'm concerned about, will I be able to, if I'm in there over the weekend, be able to put football on? I've never once thought, hopefully I can get a golf tournament. Where 20 years ago, I would have thought about, like, I need NBC or CBS or wherever Tiger's going to be golfing because I'm going to want to watch that.
So this leads us into our topic today that we're talking about. All of these professional golfers are sanctioned and play under a league called the PGA, the Professional Golfers Association, which is headquartered in Frankie's old stomping grounds down in Southeast Florida. They've been the only game in town forever, for decades and decades and decades. If you want to play professional golf, you're going to play in PGA sanctioned events. And really their claim to fame are the big four majors, the Masters, which is in Augusta, the British Open, which is now called the Open, that Frank was just talking about, the US Open. And what's the fourth? What am I missing?
The PGA.
The PGA event. So there's four big ones. And then there are lots of other events, but those four are the only ones that bring all of their best golfers together every time.
Those are called the majors.
And that's the majors. And right now the PGA is facing an upstart. I'd call them a startup, but they're probably the most financed startup I've ever heard of in my life. Which is a new golf league called Live Golf, and Live, LIV, is the name is kind of a takeoff on Roman numerals of 54, being that they only have 54 holes in their events versus 72 in the PGA events. It's also the number that if you birdied all of the holes of the 72, that's the 54. So that was kind of what they based it on. So they just started their first tournament was in June of 2022. And the difference between this league and other upstarts that we're going to talk about in this episode is this is a foreign-based league that is financed by the sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia. So we're going to get into that a little bit, but obviously the sovereign wealth fund of Saudi Arabia is backed by hundreds of billions of dollars of oil money that is very, very oil. Like no one even really knows how much money they have, but safe to say they won't run out no matter how much they spend on stealing golfers from the PGA. They will literally never run out of money. And that's even more true today with the price of oil. So that is the big threat that the PGA is facing right now. And there is a ton of noise around this LIV tour because LIV has come in and started snatching some very big names away and doing it in a way that they are paying money that these golfers have never seen in their entire lives.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a segue for me to say something because all that's true.
Yeah, so some of the names that they've stolen away, which are big names that Frank and I know, Sergio Garcia, Lee Westwood, Dustin Johnson, Brooks Koepka, Bryson DeChambeau. These are all big names. And a lot of these, Frank and I know a lot of these names because they've been good for years. So the one thing they're not doing is getting the really young, talented ones.
Not yet.
There's a few reasons for that, but just an example of the kind of money that's getting thrown around. So Dustin Johnson, who has won a number of majors, very big name in golf, probably past his prime, his peak years, but doesn't mean he can't win some tournaments. Really long hitter, really good. Since 2008, his total tour earnings, he's won 24 times on the PGA Tour, and his total earnings since 2008 is $74 million. And in June of 2022, he announced his resignation from the PGA Tour. And part of that reason is the purses for the tournaments that LIV is holding are in the magnitude of 5 times as much as a typical PGA Tour, even major. So these tournaments are offering up to $30 million US for the winning, for the winners, the top 10 placers, the teams that come out of it. And it's not exact, but apparently he was paid $150 million just to agree to go play. So it was kind of like a signing bonus where he had to play a certain number of events, but just let that sink in. 15 years of grinding your ass off, winning 24 tournaments, playing in hundreds of tournaments to make $74 million. And he was offered $150 million at the back end of his career, not in his prime days, just to join a one check. I mean, that's insane amount of compensation.
Is this not like the lottery system in the United States? This is a lump sum. This isn't an annuity.
It's a lump sum. Yes.
I know.
Yes, it's a lump sum.
So let's talk a little. Let's pivot into kind of this stuff, right? So the reason that LIV is people are livid over LIV is because it's Saudi Arabia, right? So I think the only person who's actually had an honest take is Charles Barkley. And Charles Barkley is getting wooed by this, right? Because Charles Barkley is a huge personality. He mostly spends his time inside the NBA, and he's a former NBA player, superstar, right? One of the best 50, 75 players of all times. Round mound of rebound, one of Ian and mine's absolute favorites. Degenerative gambler as well. Fantastic stuff all around. And
incredible human being.
Yeah, and terrible golfer, famous with a bad swing. But he basically said, like, look, I'm up for bid if they want to hire me to be a TV announcer, because one of the best TV announcers just left CBS, David Faraday, and he went to LIV, and the numbers are coming out. So what LIV's trying to do is they're trying to kind of be there's so many examples of this over time. The best example I can give you of this is the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers are the ones who decided and figured out, they were determined, we're going to figure out flight before anybody else. They're bicycle makers from Ohio that only worked on this seasonally, but they worked their asses off for a handful of years, where there was all these incredibly well-funded places that wanted to kind of cheat the system and figure out how to do it. The US government was paying tons of people, but the people who ultimately won were the upstarts. So it's like history will show you over and over again, it usually goes to the upstart in the long term, but people will show up and they'll try to pay money and they'll try and lure people in from the kind of a top-down approach versus a bottom-up approach. So the reason I bring that up is Barkley sees this and he's like, I'm for hire. And there's a bunch of blowback, but Charles Barkley is fantastic at being honest. He goes, look, this is selective outrage. If you work in sports, we've all accepted blood money. And that's the big thing of this is like, oh, we're backing Saudi Arabia. Like Saudi Arabia used to be our friend, now they're not our friend. And it's been back and forth a bunch of different times. Terrorists from 9/11 were all from Saudi Arabia or funded in some way from there. So there's all this outrage about like Saudi Arabia, but I think that's kind of BS. And that's what Ian and I are going to talk a little about with Liv. It's kind of, there's an old oligarch in the PGA who doesn't want to lose their position on the top of the throne. And what they're doing instead of innovating and moving forward is they're just throwing a bunch of kind of slurs out there to try and drive people, to drive down the value of this upstart.
So love that. And look, let's just go ahead and say Saudi Arabia has a terrible record for human rights. Like they've assassinated they assassinated American journalists while they were over there. They've harbored terrorists. There's a lot. But if you go to the U.S. Department of State on their website and look at Saudi Arabia, if you wanted to visit there, our government, the U.S. government, calls Saudi Arabia a great friend and trading partner, period. They are not on a banned list. They are considered a partner by the United States. And to say that America has a perfect record of human rights is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You don't become the most powerful government and military in the world without doing some dirty behind the scenes.
I'll give two examples just quickly. Pictures finally came out from Guantanamo Bay. Now, 9/11 was an atrocious thing, and I think we needed to do some very serious stuff to say, yeah, this is not allowable. But the pictures of Guantanamo Bay have come out, and these people are emaciated. It's rough. So, like, I don't know how great our record is with this. And then imagine if you're poor Ayman al-Zawahiri, you're sitting on your back porch, you're scratching your balls, you're drinking your morning coffee, you're reading your paper, and boom, you're hit with a drone. That just happened 3 days ago. So now he was like one of the number 2 guys in Al-Qaeda, and I'm saying this sarcastically, but we just dropped the drone on a dude. He, in my opinion, deserved it. But at the same time, like, if we're going to weigh the scales here, let's weigh them in a way that's fair. I don't think this has anything to do with military might or ethics. I think it has everything to do with money, and there's just things being thrown at it, kind of like we're going to talk about TikTok at one point, like, this is China spying on us, which we'll get to, but it isn't really the argument. The argument is we don't want to lose power over something, so we're going to just take the easy route, which is trying to insult it.
And so, yes, this is all lobbying. The PGA has hired lobbying groups to try to brand the Live tournament as if you go over there, they're trying to shame their golfers. If you go over there, you support human rights strategies. But what I would say is no one ever says that when Canadian and U.S. hockey players go play in Russian leagues. And last I checked, Russia doesn't have a great history of human rights.
I was just checking this morning. Brittany Griner still in jail.
No one said when LeBron James went and played in some tournaments in China. No one said a word about that. China has a miserable record on human rights. Absolutely miserable record. No one says anything when our soccer players go down and play in Venezuelan leagues for Venezuelan teams or Cuba or Brazil. No one says anything. This is all getting a lot of noise because they're kicking PGA Tour's ass. They are stealing a ton of good people. And I look at it, Frank, it's not really like a startup coming in. So let's take like the NBA and the ABA or the NFL and the AFL, upstart leagues that came up. They were trying to fund themselves. They were startups. They had to become profitable. Live is more like if you were a company doing well and Amazon saw you were doing well and you didn't have intellectual property, and they came in, they were like, we're going to just spend money until you run out.
We're going to outspend you. We're not going to go bottom up. We're going to come top down. We're going to just spend to lure you away.
For me, Live is like Amazon. And Amazon doesn't necessarily need to innovate to beat you. They're just going to bully you out of the business. It's kind of like a big home builder coming in and buying lots at really expensive prices and then losing money for a while until the market has flushed out the small guy. So I think that's why the PGA is frustrated, is the PGA saying we have to make a profit, but you don't, and that's not fair. Well, guess what? That's friggin' life. Google does this to people all the time. Apple does it to people. Amazon does it. That is the benefit of stacking up a lot of cash. You can come in there. So PGA,
before you get to PGA,
gorilla, they got to figure out how to be a startup.
So exactly. So let me interject this quickly, right? So Ian and I used to work for a publicly traded builder, Ryan Homes, NVR. So we were going with our data scientists yesterday through who's the biggest buyer in our marketplace. Like, we do a ton of deals, several hundred deals a year. Guess who kicks our ass every single year? NVR is number one. It's not even close. They're like 9-1 over us, but they're a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And what we do is we eliminate them from our search because they're playing a different sport. And what we figure out is who are our competitors down here, and we have to level the playing field with them. We can't play with them, and we can't take big punches at them because we could punch so hard we could fall. And what we do instead is we get really, really focused on what we can control and where our niche is. And what Live is able to do is they can take a huge niche because they've got an endless supply of cash. And that's not what normal other leagues, other businesses do. Ian and I kind of have a funny phrase. I think he coined it. I love it. But it's like, we call it the Dominique Wilkins of businesses. All offense, no defense. I have to have a defense. I have banks. I have lenders. I'm not publicly traded. I don't have an endless supply of cash. So I've got to be very smart about winning, but also not losing. Where an Amazon, an Apple, a Google, those companies make so much money on their primary businesses. Like search on Google makes so much money. They can have a division where they can try and go to space, which is a very expensive type of exploration, right? So because they're just all offense, they make so much money. So it changes the dynamics. But what I think we're going to kind of talk about in the crux of today's episode is kind of two things, right? What's the PR or the smear campaign? But then what's the other side of it? What is if you're actually up against this, because none of us is going to be throwing a bunch of money from Live and none of us can golf. So what should you do inside of business, either your career or business, that you can learn from this situation and you can incorporate? And I think that's where the fun part of this is. Like Ian and I have been talking about this for like a couple of months now. It's like, it started with Phil Mickelson being blacklisted from all these people. And it's like all the, help me with the word, sponsors. And then it turned into like, this is really interesting. And there's a way through this that you can get to the other side.
Yeah. Like, take aside, it just came out that Tiger Woods turned down $800 million to go to Live. 800. Like, this is the kind of money they're dealing with, that they can offer a broken down old Tiger Woods who can barely finish 18 because of his back and offer him 800 million just to be there. This is going to keep happening. So the question, and we'll use some other analogs, the question that I think the PGA Tour should be asking itself is not, is it fair that this group is stealing our people by throwing a lot of money at it? The question the PGA needs to be asking is, why don't Frank and Ian watch any of our tournaments? Why don't guys that are really into sports and betting on sports and gambling, why don't they watch any of our tournaments? Why doesn't anyone watch any of our tournaments except for the big four? That's the question they need to ask, is why are our TV ratings? Why they don't have enough revenue to pay their golfers, and now they're going to lose them because of it, because they got a lot of guys that are just barely getting by being in their tour, that Live is like, how about 20 million? If I'm them, I'm making that decision. I'm taking the money.
So let's pivot into this. We have a whole list of things that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about WWF and we're going to talk about the NBA. I'm going to start with something different that's kind of deeper down our agenda, Ian, because I think it's a good pivot point. So COVID happens, right? I'm out in California. I remember the moment the whole thing starts. And I'm like walking through an airport and it's like the weirdest thing because all sporting events stopped. So you're walking through an airport, and now that we've all lived through this, and there's TVs everywhere, and they were literally showing bowl games on every TV from several years ago. And it's like we've lived through it, right? But we were in this time warp of there was nothing new to be shown. And everybody said, screw it, let's just show old stuff. ESPN's like, we're going to speed up the delivery of the Last Dance, which is the 10-part miniseries about the Bulls, right, from the 90s. Because that was the only thing they had in production. Like, we can get eyeballs and drive revenue dollars through this. All the major sports leagues sat back and did nothing. There was a big thing when COVID first happened with quarantine, and you had to make sure you weren't spreading. So what did the UFC do? Still in startup mode. They're a behemoth, but they're smart. What they did is they said, okay, screw this. We're going to go rent an island. We're going to test everybody. We're going to create a bubble. They did the bubble before basketball and before hockey. And they had content on TV within 6 weeks. Within 6 weeks, when everybody else was standing still, it took the NBA 4 months. Within 6 weeks, they had every Friday, regular scheduled program from some undisclosed island somewhere where everyone was getting tested and nobody had it. Because what they did is they said, we are still young enough that we don't have so much bureaucracy and we're kind of an outside sport anyways. We're going to just innovate. And I thought that, like, I'm not a huge UFC guy, but it was always in the Wall Street Journal. Ian and I would talk about it. We're like, that is freaking brilliant. And that's what we're going to talk about is how do you use a motivator? How do you turn a threat into a motivator? And that's what's exciting about this for us.
So, another example that I would say, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, they're just the gorillas, right? They own social media. They own the eyeballs. When you see kids on their phones, it was one of those three things forever. And then TikTok comes along, and TikTok takes everything addictive about all of those platforms and jacks it up on steroids. It makes the clips shorter. It turns the algorithm. And if you go look at the user terms of TikTok, it's gross, like how much they're stealing from information and what they know about you. And TikTok just absolutely takes all the attention away from these big players. And the first reaction from Facebook, Zuckerberg, and Google, all these guys, the first reaction is to say, it's China. We got to ban it, right? So Facebook has spent tens of millions of dollars lobbying efforts to get TikTok banned in the country. So instead of they're playing the same gross game that we play, which is getting people addicted to their phones. Why are they beating us? Instead of that, they try to get them banned. They try to say it's not fair, which it's hilarious thinking about Zuckerberg saying something's not fair. I mean, he's about as evil a CEO as you can get with the way he tries to get people into things. But that was their approach. And they did that for a while until they realized this isn't working. People like TikTok. They're going to keep using it. So what that did was it forced them to go change how they set things up. So now if you see Instagram has Reels, Facebook has Stories, YouTube has Shorts. And really, if you go look at it, those platforms have just tried to look more like TikTok. Short 15, 20 seconds that just keep scrolling into your feed, an algorithm that just keeps pumping dopamine and moving forward. And they're taking market share back, but TikTok forced them to change. And it wasn't until they realized, well, if you can't beat them, join them. We're going to go try to give people what they want, that they started to make some progress. But until then, all they were doing was bitching that China's spying on you. Well, you're spying on us. Like, just because you're America, we should be happy you're spying on. You're all doing the same damn thing, which is stealing data to use against us later.
So I'm going to pivot into the NFL. So when Ian and I were born, the NFL and the AFL had already merged. The Super Bowl era had begun, but there was an upstart league called the AFL, and they were the Renegades. The Raiders were in the AFL, and they're always known as the Renegade League or the Renegade Team. And they innovated a ton. But what they did is they kind of forced their way into the mainstream, and that became, it was the AFL, the NFL, they merged, Super Bowl era, that whole thing happened, right? But TV in the 1950s and 1960s is not what it is today. From the standpoint of like the clarity, but the game became perfect for TV. And the NFL is the undisputed champ of television watching for sports. It just is. Like if you start to look at it now, there's less and less to do with the stadiums. They used to have blackouts. They're starting to do away with those things because it's all about the TV revenue. The TV revenue drives it. But if you're at the top of the heap, you're going to get people who kind of throw haymakers at you. And I'm going to give you 4 examples that I think are fascinating. The first one is the World League of American Football. Happened in the early 90s, and it used teams in America, but also in Europe. And in the European, in this version, what they did is they wanted to kind of go global and take the American sport and kind of pick a time during the year where it wasn't as much of a driver. And they were all over the place. Now, it's really hard because of time zones and travel to get an American sport from 2 different continents. But let's look at what happened. The World League ultimately folded, but the the NFL ended up purchasing most of it. And now they still develop talent in Europe and other countries because the NFL is global. So think about this. There's like, how many kickers have you seen, Ian, that come from New Zealand and England? There's tons of them, right? Mm-hmm. It's soccer players, it's South Americans, it's folks who are part of this global outreach that started with the World League of American Football. And the Dolphins and the Jaguars are terrible. The Dolphins sadly are terrible, but they're near and dear to my heart. They can't fill their stadiums. So what do every single year? They play a home game in London. And the whole reason for that is because we're trying to drive traffic to this world sport that happened through the World League of American Football. Anything to add on World League before I get into USFL?
Nope.
So with USFL, same thing, right? This was there's a reincarnation of this now, or incarnation of it now. But in the 80s, when Ian and I were kids, the USFL came up. What did they do that was really big, Ian? What did they do with Herschel Walker? How'd they let him get into the league, and what changed the NFL because of Herschel Walker?
So they went and sold it. At the time, you had to graduate college to get into the NFL. Part of that was just safety issue. It's right. They wanted you to be a fully grown man to get into the NFL and not get hurt. But the USFL went in and said, Herschel, you're a junior. You don't need to play your senior year. Come make a ton of money with us rather than risking getting injured at Georgia. You already got a handful of Heisman trophies. What else do you have to prove? Come play. And they allowed the minimum age to be junior before you could be drafted.
And that's changed the NFL. The NFL's adapted it. They also pioneered, because they're uncertain in some ways, some free agency tendencies that the NFL copied. Now, again, this league is almost 40 years old, but there are things that resonate through it. The AAFL was only around for like 2 years. But they ended up going bankrupt, but they ended up putting in technology with helmet cams and on-field mics. Now, these were things that were just special issue in the NFL. Like if ESPN was going to wire you, they would do it. Now this stuff is like we take for granted every single day. But I think the one that's had the biggest impact on the television era is the WWF. The WWF did the XFL, and they did the XFL again a second time, like right before COVID, and both of them went belly up. But what the WWE does incredibly well is they create stories and they create villains. And Ian's going to talk about in a second, like how great the WWF is at this. But they did sideline reporters for every game. That was something that was not happening prior. They did in-game interviews. Now, if you watch a baseball game or a basketball game, there's in-game interviews. This all started with the XFL. And then there's that incredible rig that's now kind of taken for granted that they put up at every stadium, including indoor basketball arenas, and it flies around, and they call it the Sky Cam. All of those were the invention of the XFL. There was more stuff, but those were the really big things. And if you look at that, what these leagues did is they saw it. They're like, okay, this is an upstart. This is cool. Can we take some of this and incorporate it into our product and make it better? And this is what Ian and I are driving at with Live. we think the PGA Tour can innovate in a way that these other leagues have, but that's what the NFL has done and done very well.
Yeah, what's interesting is about all four of those leagues, Frankie, they had to do things different because the NFL is so popular.
That's right.
In this country, so they had to do different things, like with the cameras, the in-game interviews,
they had to make it compelling, and they didn't have the athletes.
Personalities. They had to pay the USFL paid huge money to people, so that kind of forced the NFL to pay more, to share more. The free agency thing is really big. You remember, like Reggie White was like the first big name guy to leave, and everyone said free agency is going to kill the sport. Because back then it was you started and you finished your career somewhere. It didn't kill the sport. It made it better. People had more opportunities, more competition. So all of these, what I'll say the NFL did really good is they'd say, that's cute. Good idea. People like that. We'll do it. Okay, we'll do it. And we still have the stars. And then those leagues just go away. They can't, because they, instead of complaining about it, let's go take your innovation and get a little bit leaner. And the example, Frankie and I talked about this, that I like is there used to be two major professional wrestling organizations, and the WWE.
Now, our half-assed internet research leads us to believe that Vince McMahon screwed women in both leagues, but we'll get to that later.
Could happen. But the WWE was the big one, and it was kind of bolstered by its star, which was Hulk Hogan for all through the 80s. And then the WCW, which was kind of a Southern, more of a regional player. They weren't really a big player. They did have Ric Flair, which is the man. But they weren't as national. Yeah, they weren't as national as WWE. Little Hulkster there. But WCW went and stole the biggest star in the WWE. They stole Hulk Hogan. And that would be like if Liv got Tiger Woods almost at his peak. I mean, Hulk was still in great shape, was still the biggest draw in WWE. They got him for a lot of money. They brought him over. And what they did was they turned Hulk Hogan into a villain. So Hulk Hogan became Hollywood Hogan. He changed his whole outfit. He went
from like yellow. He went from all yellows and reds to like blacks.
All black.
Blacked out his beard.
And they stole some other big names that came along, and they created this thing called the New World Order, which was, they were just a bunch of bad boys, and all they did was cheap shot you. And they got just as bigger crowds than WWE that drew. And it was because people hated Hulk Hogan now. So they went into this kind of tough area. So WWE, instead of complaining, it's not fair, you stole Hulk Hogan from us and turned him into a villain. What do? They adapt. They're like, they used to be this real wholesome, like the heroes carried American flags. Like Hulk Hogan always had an American flag. Hacksaw Jim Duggan carried an American flag.
The only villains were like from the Eastern Bloc or from like Russia. Yes. It was like the Iron Sheik and like all those guys.
Yes, they were from Iran or Russia, or Sergeant Slaughter, the American, is beating up on some guy from Iraq. It was very much like that. And it was almost cartoonish. And so people were kind of tired of it. They were like, it's not realistic. The WCW took the viewers. So what did WWE do? They created the Attitude Era. So this is when Stone Cold Steve Austin rose. This is when The Rock rose. They had D-Generation X. They pretty much had all these folks that came in that were cursing, drinking beer, flipping the camera off, and people were like, yes, we want more of this. And all the old stars kind of went away because they were from a wholesome era. What happened? They took all the viewers back, and ultimately WWE bought the WCW. But that was an existential threat they had, that if they wouldn't have adopted and innovated WCW, there was a time where the two were even. You didn't know which one was going to come out the winner. It was like a Pepsi Coke kind of battle. And WWE looked at what was working, because McMahon was good at kind of seeing what the people wanted. And what McMahon did that ultimately put him over the top, he made himself a character in pro wrestling, and he became like the evil villain boss. And he would let guys like Stone Cold and The Rock beat the crap out of him every week. And people loved it, because everyone dreams of beating up their boss. So he was the billionaire tycoon jerk boss. And he'd come in and start cussing out his wrestlers, and they'd beat his ass. And everyone loved it. And that literally turned everything for them. And they ended up acquiring the WCW.
So two quick things, and then we're going to get into some more business examples. But the NBA is incredible, right? But the NBA had an upstart competitor in the 70s called the ABA. Dr. J played in the NBA or the ABA before he moved over. And there was two things that they did that are still with us today. One of them was the three-point line. And the three-point line is now a major, major part of the game. Think about Steph Curry. This is hysterical to me. When I go play basketball with a bunch of 40-year-old dudes, everyone's like, protect against the three. The best players on earth hit like 39% from three. And like, but we've all been reprogrammed because of Steph Curry to go protect the three. It's like, I'm going to let you take it and take the math here. You're not going to make it. You're a desk jockey who's really good at Excel. You're going to miss. But it's hysterical. And that came to us through the ABA. The ABA also invented something else that's incredible. All-Star Weekend. Now, the slam dunk contest is the biggest thing, but they did a skills challenge and they did a whole all-star weekend that has now been completely stolen by the NBA. All of that stuff they did years ago, and it gets tiring, so they kind of refresh it over the years. But the slam dunk, the three-point contest, the skills and dribbling challenges, there was like old timer, like all of that stuff the ABA did because they needed to draw eyeballs and they were innovative. So the NBA has since taken all of those.
Well, that like everything you've used from a sports example, though, Frankie, is the upstarts focused on the personalities and the talent, and the big organizations had forgotten that, and they started to lose, and the small guys force them.
They reprioritize it,
just like in a business, that we better prioritize our best people and make them the stars, and not let the executives be the stars that make all the money. That forced a lot of them to do that in every one of those sports examples.
So the last sporting example before getting into business is the Major League Baseball, right? There's a famous saying that I've heard and Ian have heard on podcasts. Other leagues adapt and innovate, and the Major League MLB steals it and monetizes it. Examples, free agency. The strike zone is big. They've been using this technology in tennis for years, and now in the minor leagues, they're using strike zones. Why are they manipulating the strike zone and not using humans for the strike zone? There's a really specific reason, and it's not just because the interpretive nature of it. What happens if you use technology with strike zones?
Well, they haven't done it exactly yet. They still have umpires.
But they're experimenting with it, and the whole goal is to get the game to be faster. And the reason they want the game to be faster is because upstarts like soccer are now stealing the European market, and you can get a baseball game. Baseball games can take 2, 3, 4, 5 hours in some instances, and soccer's done in 2 hours or less. So they're adapting. The baseball era was so big when there was box scores, and box scores are no longer as relevant. So they're trying to figure out ways to move forward. So I thought those were two really unique examples with MLB. There's other things, but I think that's the stuff that we should cover.
So, classic business examples. In the 80s, Coke had just crazy dominance in sodas, and Pepsi came along and they created the Pepsi Taste Challenge, which Frank and I are both kids of the 80s. You remember all these ads, and they were compelling, right? They would put a blindfold on some random dude in the street of New York and be like, taste this, and which one do you like more? And, they would ask them first, like, what's your favorite soda? And they'd be like, Coke, for sure. I love Coke. And they put a blindfold on them, have them taste both, and be like, that's my favorite. That's got to be Coke. And they'd be like, nope, it's Pepsi. And there was this Pepsi challenge. It was everywhere. And we challenge you to take it. And these ads destroyed Coke. Like people bought it. They bought in of like, oh man, we've been blindsided by Coke's marketing. Pepsi is actually tastier, to the point where they lost enough market share where Coke went and created the new Coke, which was just a new formula. And it tasted a lot like Pepsi, and it was kind of gross. And their current customers who liked Coke got pissed off and didn't want to buy the new Coke and wanted the old Coke back. And what did they do? They brought back Coke Classic. And then they started running a series of ads of their own saying, we're doing taste tests and people like Coke more. They literally just stole the Pepsi challenge, brought back Classic Coke, and said, look, people like Classic Coke way more than Pepsi. Beat them at their own game, spent a bunch more in marketing, the rest is history. Coke is still the dominant player. The existential threat kind of went away. And another one that I love is the beer wars of the 80s are fantastic. And
They're awesome.
it's one that I'm close to because there was a time in the 70s where Stroh's, which is made out of Detroit, Stroh's was the dominant beer manufacturer in the country. I grew up seeing all of my uncles, my dad just crushing Stroh's every barbecue. I mean, that was the beer of choice around our house because it was a Michigan beer and it was the cheapest to probably get. And Stroh's created an ad campaign. So Stroh's started losing market share to the point where Anheuser-Busch had grown enough of their market share and they had acquired their way to being the dominant provider in the 80s. But Stroh's came out with an ad campaign and they aired their first one where there's a dog named Alex from Stroh's. And there's a couple of guys playing poker and the guy's like, I'm going to go get a beer. You want one? And the guy whose house he was like, no, don't do that. He's like, Alex. And he, kind of makes a sign at him and Alex barks back and leaves and comes back with 2 Stroh's. And
Alex was the first Alexa, by the way.
Absolutely. People loved this commercial to the point where they made dozens of commercials with Alex from Stroh's from 1984 to 1989, tremendously successful to the point where it was getting market share gains back. So what does Anheuser-Busch do? Well, real creative. They go and get their own dog. So they release Spuds MacKenzie, who was their kind of version of a party dog. And they released that in a Super Bowl commercial in 1988. Spuds MacKenzie, if you were around in the late 80s, everyone loved Spuds MacKenzie. Everyone knew that name. They pounded you with commercials of Spud MacKenzie. I mean, pounded. I had a T-shirt with Spud MacKenzie on it.
Me too.
As love a friggin' 12-year-old, a beer T-shirt with Spuds on there. Everyone loves Spuds MacKenzie. And ultimately, like kind of right or the wrong. But again, here was someone fighting who was someone smaller in market share, fighting the big guy with creativity. And the big guy just went and got forced to kind of, I wouldn't even call that really innovation. It was more copying. Sadly, I don't know if you know this, Frank, but Alex died of cancer before we could really see who won between Alex and Spud. So I don't know that I can give that as a pure win to Spuds MacKenzie because Alex went down due to natural causes.
I love it. So we can talk a lot about like with cell phones. We can talk about Apple versus Microsoft. Like Steve Jobs used to always say, like Microsoft doesn't do anything creative. They just steal everything we do. As an example, in the Walter Isaacson book about Steve Jobs, he literally goes into how Steve Jobs enrolled. He didn't even enroll in college. He just dropped in. He walked in the classes. And when he was at Stanford for a short period of time, the one class he actually showed up to was calligraphy. And he thought calligraphy was incredible. So he fell in love with fonts and typefaces. And like there used to just be like a green screen with like a blinking cursor and, you would type. Steve Jobs made it beautiful. And he made it so you could pick and choose whichever type of font you liked. We all know the word font because you can change your font on your cell phone now. You can change it everywhere. But Microsoft is the one who took that example and just basically stole it. And they incorporated it in everything that you can do with Word or, Microsoft 365 nowadays. And it was incredible because like it came from a calligraphy class. Someone saw it, made the innovation, and then the bigger animal just stole it and turned it into something different. But what I think we should do at this point, Ian, unless you want to spend more time on phones and kind of tech, let's get into what we think Lib should do to innovate. Well, what
if you look at all that tech, do. I mean, Frankie, I love that you brought this up. When the iPhone came out, it was an incredible piece of technology, and a lot of that innovation came from Apple, which really kind of put Motorola out of the business, BlackBerry out of the business. But what's interesting is Samsung at the time, they were the manufacturing partner. They were making the chips. They were making a lot of the components, even though the ideas were Apple's. And then Samsung started making their own phones. And what's interesting is it started with Apple being the innovator, but by like the fourth version of the iPhone, Samsung started being the innovator because now Apple had all the market share. So Samsung's the one coming out with better security. They came out with you can read your face to open your phone. They were the ones that would come out with something, wireless charging. And then Apple, somewhere along, I don't know when it was, maybe it was Apple 4 or 5, Apple became the fast follower because they were the gorilla, and Samsung, to get market share, had to keep innovating. And Apple would have these boring features. People complain Samsung's better and I'm switching. Next thing you know, the next phone, Apple would have it. So it's kind of interesting, even with big companies, they kind of still copy each other and are forced to innovate. It's usually the guy chasing in market share who has to be creative to go take market share. Because if I don't have it today, somehow I'm not serving a need someone else is. I need to do something interesting enough that gets someone to change from status quo. And that's what PGA is going to have to do, or they're going to lose all of their golfers to live.
Right before we get into PGA, I'll say one last thing attributed to Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs said, good artists copy, great artists steal. And he was the one that was pissed off at Bill Gates for stealing all his copy and font face. But when it came to cell phones and those technology, it's absolutely what happened. You started off with 1,000 songs in your pocket with the iPod, and it continued to morph. And as Ian said, that's how integration works. It's a tug of war. It's not a straight up chart. It's got the jagged ups and downs because of the fact that it's a constant process of evolution. And I think this is a perfect way to segue into it. If the PGA innovates, this might be a small pullback that can ultimately fuel a huge rally. If not, it could tank the stock. And these are some ideas that, two guys that don't really golf have come up with, but hopefully the people at the PGA take the product and they rejigger it, because they have one incredible advantage over everybody else. They have all the youth and they have all the history. So they have the talent and they have all of the prestige. Like going and winning a live tournament that's not even on television is a lot less appealing than having somebody go and win the Masters. So these are some of the things that Ian and I have come up with that we think could help spark, innovation inside of PGA.
So rather than bitch and moan and demonize live and focus on, anyone who goes over there is doesn't care about human rights, or, if you go to live, you're never coming back to PGA Tour, which I think is a huge blunder that they're doing that, because
I think
what if their top 5 golfers, Frank, all go to live?
Yeah.
And you want them back. Now you've set a precedent where we can't take them back. That doesn't work. Whenever you say that you'll never come back to a star, you're an idiot. Like, what if Vince McMahon would have said Hulk Hogan can never come back? Because Hulk came back and had a great run at WWE. You can't ban people for life, because what if everyone goes and be like, there's no life left of PGA?
What will ultimately happen is this. The CEO of the PGA Tour will get fired. They'll bring in a new person. That new person will say, well, we're under new leadership. We've reconsidered this. The only way you can possibly retrace that is the leader of the organization is going to have to his head's going to get chopped off, which is fitting talking about Saudi Arabia. You're
right. And so this advice is for the new CEO of PGA, because the one currently right now,
it's already cooked.
Your ass getting canned because your ideas suck. Your ideas are just, let's hire more lawyers, and that never works when you're up against.
All right, let's take a quick pause. This is yet another, you heard it here first, folks. Right here on Let Me Speak to a Manager. Ian and I were early on the recession. We are early on the pullback of real estate. All of these things are coming to fruition.
We were early on inflation. We've been early on friggin' everything. FYI.
And adapting hats during the work week. We're early on that as well. And
very big.
Yes,
very
big. We may be unwoke, but damn it, we're early.
We are unwoke, and we're early on that too. It might be cool to be woke, but we're early on being unwoke. That trend is picking up right now. So number one, I think we've been pounding this home. The PGA needs to leverage their stars. I love what Frank just said. Frank wouldn't know what Scotty Scheffler looks if he walked into his office today. Frank would be like, "Can I help you?" I think it was one of his renters coming in there. They don't leverage the personalities well at all of these folks. We don't know who they are. I kind of feel like the PGA and the way they do tournaments, Frank, they're spread out all over. And in any given tournament, you might have 5 of the world's top 20, in there, and 5 others are at another tournament somewhere else. Some are on TV, some are not. But I think they could learn from UFC, so Ultimate Fighting Competition. The UFC, what they did for forever, the only combat sport was boxing. That was it, right? And there were a few big names. In the 80s, it was huge, right? Because you had all the middleweights that were great, Hearns and Hagler. Then you had the heavyweights like Tyson coming through and Holyfield. But then they just forever, no one knew who the big names were. There's like, even today, Frank, there's like one fight a year in boxing that kind of feels like I want to go see it. Maybe.
So the only fight I'm even compelled to see is Tyson when he put on those big gloves and beat the crap out of that guy. And there's the YouTube star who's now like going and fighting people and he's training really hard. Like that's more compelling to me than the actual top fighters. And it all because it revolves around personality.
It's
like
Logan Paul. You're talking about Logan Paul. You're talking about a famous guy fighting another famous guy. That's more interesting than the actual fighters because you're focused on the people, who they are in their stories.
We've seen it. We've seen the Rocky story so many times. It's boring. You get me 2 people who aren't really boxers. Like if Rob Gronkowski would go fight, I would stay up past 11 o'clock to watch that. Like I would love to watch Gronkowski get in a ring. Think about the biggest UFC fights. Like when Conor McGregor boxed. Well, I don't even remember who he boxed. Was it Floyd Mayweather? Like
Mayweather, yeah.
And remember, I fell asleep and someone had to wake me up to watch it because I fell asleep on the couch. And I was like, "This is awesome!" And it was
compelling.
Really, yeah.
But think about it, Frankie. That's how the UFC became the #1 combat sport in the world.
That's right.
Nothing. What they did was they took average Joes. So they would take 2 guys. One's like a Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighter from South America, and then they would take another guy who his style was brawling. There was a guy by the name of Tank Abbott, and they interviewed him. He's like, yeah, most of my fighting is done in bars. I like to fight and punch people. And you take 2 guys with totally different styles, talk about their personalities, and they would fight. But what UFC did really well that boxing does terrible, there just is not enough boxing with compelling personalities. The UFC, I feel like every other weekend, there's a big UFC event. And with 2 personalities that people that follow that sport really know, the UFC went out, they created reality shows where they would show, they would take 12 young upstart fighters and you'd get to really know them. And it was an elimination. Every week, someone drops off the show.
Right.
And then the winner of that is a star right out of the gate. And his next UFC event, so not only did UFC make money on the show by ratings and selling ads, the winners, and not even just the winners, the ones that would come in 3rd and 4th, you got to know them and you're rooting for them over 12 weeks in this competition. As soon as they have a fight, people are plopping down $50 to watch them fight. So what we think would work, focus on personalities, but focus on more events that are, a problem with some of the tournaments is like 150 guys are in it and it's spread out over 5 hours. You don't know when guys are golfing. Have more 1-on-1, 2-on-2 events, 4-on-4 events where the action is intense and you're only paying attention to 4 or 8 guys. If there's 150 guys in there and my favorite player is Dustin Johnson, the odds of Dustin Johnson winning are not high. It's 150 guys you're up against, right? Only Tiger Woods won all of them. But if there's 4, the odds of my guy winning are pretty high. He's only got to beat 3 guys to go win it. And that's what you and I love. When you and I go golf, we're like, hey, $10 who gets closest to the hole on this shot, or $10 longest drive, or let's do a scramble where we go best ball.
It's why the NFL is so compelling. And for people who are really paying attention to baseball, it's still compelling. There's fantasy baseball, which kind of started first, and then there's fantasy football, and you can gamble on everything. Imagine if they did a 16-person tournament, 4 foursomes, and the 2 foursomes all played, but it was a shotgun start, and there was always somebody good. The top 16 players were playing. So this is a dated story, but it's a really relevant story, and some of this stuff has come out in the news. But when this story broke, or when this happened to me, like this wasn't popular knowledge, like we didn't all know about it. So I'm flying on a flight to Florida 10, 15 years ago, and I text Ian as soon as I land. I'm sitting next to this guy and he's got on these pair of incredible Beats headphones. And I asked him, I'm like, are you in music? And he goes, no, I'm not in music. I'm a professional wrestler. I didn't recognize him. I never heard of him. I was like, so how'd you get the headphones? They're like, well, Beats wants us to wear them because if we wear them, they think that people will buy the Beats headphones. And this is before Beats was sold to Apple, the whole thing. So I'm like, so what are you doing going to Tampa? And he told me, he's like, I go to Tampa because there's a training facility here. I'm like, what do they train you on? Wrestling? He goes, well, it's part of it. We do TV training. We do personality training. They do all of these things because the WWE is an entertainment business. What Ian and I talked about Russia fighting the US, that was compelling in 1986, but it wasn't compelling in 1991. So what they did is they just took different people across America and made them fight with each other, which think about where wrestling is popular. That's what they kind of learned. We have a populace who wants something and we are here to entertain them. And what they did is they teach the wrestlers how to move, but they spend more time on training for interviews, personality, outfitting, all of these different things this guy told me about. I was like, this is fascinating. He also told me about like in the ring, the referee wears an earpiece and the referee tells the wrestlers if they need to speed up the match, slow it down, if production wants them to do something. Because what WWE realizes is the value is the superstar and the audience. And if you have the superstar, the audience will follow. And that's what the PGA Tour is lacking. They're just lazy and entitled.
3 of the top 5 wrestlers in pro wrestling of the last 50 years, Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Ultimate Warrior. All 3 terrible in-ring wrestlers. You ever watch Ultimate Warrior versus Hulk Hogan? There are no moves. There's just a lot of punches, running into the ropes.
It's like 2 refrigerators charging at each other.
You might get a body slam here and there. They're not like compelling technical. Like Bret Hart was a great wrestler. He could do every move in the world. He wasn't as compelling in front of a microphone.
Right.
Like those guys are just compelling talkers. So focus on the personalities. I'd also say make it easier to gamble on golf. I don't like make it create some kind of fantasy, create some
there's nothing on FanDuel for golf. Like there's you might get tournaments.
But what makes football great is every week there's something with the favorite people that we have on our fantasy teams. I can gamble every week. Yeah, maybe I'll
shit talk each other and email and text. Like we're constantly going back and forth. It's compelling.
But betting on golf sucks. It's like there's 150 guys in the field and you bet on maybe 3 or 4 guys to win it all, but their odds of winning are literally like 40-1 because they're up against 150 other people. Make it easier to gamble on when you go into it. And, you know, another thing I would say is just the format. It's 4 days of golfing 18 a day. And most of the guys are out by the second day. Like they'll still play the next 2 rounds, but if you're down 10 strokes on Friday, you're not making any noise.
Mercy rule them.
Why are you still playing? So an idea I've got on this, steal from March Madness with your tournaments. First 9, have everyone go head to head and if there's 160 people at the end of the first day, there are now 80 people because we've eliminated a batch and you'd have upsets because in any 118 rounds, number 70 in the world could beat number 1. It's just hard for number 70 to beat him 4 days in a row. So have like colossal upsets where it's like, holy shit, did you see Tiger Woods, the number 1 seed, just lost to Jock Jones from Canada, who sucks at golf, but he beat him in 18 holes? Like, I think that would be way more compelling if you made it an elimination where like there's upsets and every day that you get past, there's only half of the people left.
They do some of those tournaments now. They do like maybe 4 of those a year, but it's just lost because it's not properly promoted. There's a way to upgrade it. So what I will get back to is like the ABA and the NBA. Like the slam dunk contest, there's only so many ways you can slam a basketball into a net. So they have to add gimmicks and things and refresh it over time. But what was old becomes new again. What the PGA needs to do is they need to realize they've got the biggest advantage. They've got history and they got people. And most young kids aspire to win tournaments in the PGA. There was an interview from a guy last name Rahm. He's from Spain. He's made a bunch of money, and he basically comes out, and John Rahm, he comes out and goes, my wife and I have talked about this. We had an opportunity to do live. I've got more money than I need. I want to compete against the best. And when I grew up as a kid, I wanted to play and win here against the best. They have that. But if they innovate and they get fans involved, they can kick the crap out of people with deep pockets because they have the talent, they have the history, and they have the ability. And what I think is on this is critical. I have people who copy me in Richmond, Virginia. Like a buddy of mine just went to a mastermind event. He's like, this guy's from Richmond. He's got your logo. Like it's called CVA, like literally CVA. The only thing missing is the middle A. Like it's the same as me. His bio is my bio with his name on it, and he added his wife's name. It's like there's copycats, but that's fine. But if he innovates or does something smart and he starts to take my market share, I've got to be honest about it. And then I've got to say, how do I innovate past this person? Because people are always trying to come up the ladder. And that's what we want to talk about with this. Live is one example, but there's thousands of them.
Yeah, I think that's right. And, get folks to pay attention to more than 4 majors. And I think rather than focusing on fairness and what are people paying, go focus on revenue. Make more money on a weekly basis, get your revenue up so you can pay your people better, right? They're crying, we can't pay that. Well, you can't pay that because your revenue sucks. Like any company, if you are getting beat and getting people poached from you, make more revenue so you can afford to keep the people you have.
Do you know the first thing I would do if I was the PGA? I'd hire Charles Barkley as an announcer. Like, bring him in. He's exciting. Start to innovate. Like, do little things like that. And then start bringing people in. Become a magnet. Charles Barkley doesn't want to leave because he's got a rich TNT contract. Bring him in as a second job. How many networks does Michael Strahan work for? 17? He literally is on every channel. Like, I don't know how that guy physically is in New York and LA concurrently throughout the NFL season. He's figured it out. And he brings viewers to all people watch football that would never watch football because of him. They made it smart and they just figured out how to lead innovatively. And that's what I think we have to talk about. It could happen in Live, but it can happen in every other part of your business. You have to think, how do we push the envelope? It's not what can we afford? What can we not afford to live without? And that is how you get further.
Yeah, I love that. And more rivalries. You need more rivalries. Rivalries are great. People love rivalries. Get more golfers that can't stand each other. Work on those storylines so you know it's going to be intense, and then put them in the same twosome, going up against each other where the two don't even talk to each other. They just hate each other, right? You need more of that where people are kind of picking a side right now. It's hard to pick a side when everyone's friends and everyone gets along, which I think this gets me to the last piece. Let all those Live guys back because all the PGA guys hate them. They all hate them because they all went and took money. They're like the evil empire. Let them back in. They're all the Hollywood Hogans that sold out, went heel, and all the baby faces will be the PGA people. Why would you not want them back? I would want them back so bad, and I would put a Live guy with a PGA guy on every hole teeing off. They all hate each other, right? Put Rory with Bryson because they're talking shit about each other all over the news. Put them against each other and then keep the cameras on their faces. Make them interact with each other. That's what works for pro wrestling. That works for Michael Jordan versus the Pistons. It works for Lakers versus Celtics. It works for every rivalry in pro football. It works for Hagler versus Hearns. You put two rivals that can't stand each other and you pit them against each other. That's a storyline that works. So I would be like, you're welcome back whenever you want, and I'm going to put you in with the guy who didn't take $25 million.
And then the PGA should send the Live tournament a Christmas card and say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You forced us to wake up because no one was watching our.
That's right.
The truth is, we were a bunch of old men watched it, and now we got all kinds of young fans, energy, because you forced us to grow up and focus on revenue and focus on our customers and our audience. And by doing that, we were able to pay our golfers more, and we became the destination again. And we lost that for a while. Liv, you helped us. Thank you very much, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia.
The last thing we should say is that the PGA should bring in Vin Scully if they really want to bring this to the next level.
Ooh, that's really good. That's really good. And just like Let Me Speak to a Manager is forcing Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss to friggin' innovate and get their together, we will take all of your goddamn ears and we will steal them. We are stealing your followers. You had better innovate and get unwoke like us real quick, or we'll take all of your followers. Fact. We're coming for you, Rogan.
I was going to say something insensitive, but I think we're done.
That got very pro wrestling there at the end. Frankie, it was good to see you.
Always a pleasure, Ian.